The first distress signal was little more than a whisper through static, a broken code packet limping through subspace, battered by jamming fields and the wreckage of shattered relay stations. By the time it reached the neutral listening post at Ganymede's outer array, it carried only fragments, coordinates, identifiers, and one repeating plea. Help. The signal was routed, verified, and archived. It should have been another forgotten cry in the void, one of thousands that streamed across the stars every cycle. The galaxy was always burning somewhere. But when the duty officer on rotation passed the transmission, his segmented eyes widened, his mandibles clicking with something alien to his species. Fear. Because the coordinates didn't belong to some backwater colony or fringe world. They marked Velthar Prime, seat of the Velthari Concord, a star nation whose fleets once rivaled the Council itself. And the voice encoded in the transmission wasn't Velthari at all. It was Tarkel, Supreme Strategos of the Concord. The officer listened again, mandibles twitching. Help. Coordinates attached. We cannot hold. Send them. Send. The feed dissolved into static. By dawn cycle, the signal had spread through every intelligence bureau in the Council. By mid-cycle, emergency sessions were called. And by the next cycle, the entire Galactic Council chamber, carved from starbone and crystal, had been summoned. The chamber had heard many things over its millennia. Declarations of war, pleas for mercy, oaths of alliance, but never before had it heard the Velthari beg. On the dais, Councillor Resh of the Osirians flicked his feathered crests in contempt. Typical, he hissed. They built their empire on conquest, and now they squeal for aid when the predators circle back. From the far curve of the dais, a hulking Jernak warrior rumbled deep in his chest. Not predators, something worse. He projected holofeeds recovered from the Velthari frontier, burning skies, orbital stations collapsing into oceans of fire, fleets reduced to slag in hours, ships the size of mountains drifting silent, gutted by beams no Council arsenal possessed. Even the crystal walls of the chamber dimmed at the sight. "It is not an invasion," whispered Councillor Vale of the Orin. Her translucent skin pulsed faintly as she spoke. "It is an erasure." The chamber broke into clamour, voices rising in panic, denial, fury. Some called for mobilization, others demanded isolation. But amid the storm of voices, one delegate remained still. Ambassador Kalen of Earth. He was unremarkable in appearance compared to the other species. No towering crests, no luminous skin, no claws or fangs. Just a human man in dark fatigues, his gaze steady, his hands folded. When the speaker demanded silence, Kalen's voice carried through the chamber like a knife drawn slow from a sheath. "You all heard it. They asked for help." Resh flared his feathers. "And what do you propose, human? That we throw our fleets into the void as well? That we die alongside them?" Kalen's eyes did not move from the burning holofeeds. No, not fleets. He leaned forward slightly. Something else. A ripple passed through the chamber. Everyone knew Earth's history. Humanity was not ancient, nor vast, nor wealthy. But when war came, they fought like nothing else in the stars. They were a death-world species, carved from famine, ice, and endless war. Even the Council, for all its pride, spoke in hushed tones about the Terran wars of unification, about the soldiers bred not just to fight, but to end fights. Earth had weapons the Council forbade, doctrines the Council outlawed, and Earth had something else, something whispered about, never confirmed. Kalen let the silence stretch before he spoke again. "They wanted help. We'll send it." The decision was not made in the chamber. The Council postured and delayed, but humanity had never waited for permission. That night cycle, encrypted bursts leapt from Earth's deep-net arrays, bouncing through quantum mirrors toward facilities whose names had been struck from every record. Bunkers opened, vaults unsealed. On the far side of Luna, a hangar buried beneath kilometers of rock began to shake as engines older than the Council itself stirred to life. Black holes emerged, hulks of steel and fury, hidden for centuries under the guise of decommissioning. They were not fleet ships. They were not carriers, nor battleships. They were something else. Men and women were summoned from shadow units whose names no longer existed, wearing insignias no one dared display. Their training had not been designed for peacekeeping or border patrol or defense. It was designed for the only purpose humans had ever mastered to perfection, ending threats. They were not many. They did not need to be. The Velthari had asked for help. What they would get was Earth's deadliest. The Velthar system burned. Tarkel, Supreme Strategos, stood upon the shattered balcony of his command citadel, watching orbital fire rain like comets across his capital world. His once proud fleets were gone, 3 armadas broken in less than a cycle, the Concord's vaunted ground legions scattered, crushed beneath metal titans that stalked the battlefield without sound, and in his ears a whisper. They are coming. They are coming. The enemy never identified itself. No communication, no parley, only silence followed by annihilation. Worlds went dark without explanation. Colonies vanished. Starbases blinked out one by one until only Velthar Prime remained. When the humans came, the skies split. Black holes pierced the blockade, ignoring the storm of fire that should have reduced them to atoms. They moved with predatory precision, slipping between plasma bursts, cutting through ships 10 times their size as if they were paper. Tarkel staggered as comms filled with new voices. Not alien, not unknown. Human voices, clipped and cold. Velthar Command, this is Earth Response Unit. Sit tight. You called. We answered. The Strategos gripped the rail, his mandibles trembling. He had asked for help, and help had come. But as he watched the humans descend like blades into the burning city, he wondered if he had unleashed something far worse than the enemy at his gates. The Galactic Council chamber was carved from the bones of a star. Every wall a lattice of living crystal that pulsed with inner light, as if the cosmos itself breathed through its veins. For the assembled races of the galaxy, this place was sacred. For humanity, it was a cage. Another stage where judgment was passed down by those who had never set foot on Earth, never tasted the storms that could strip flesh from bone, never survived a winter that could kill a man in days. The councillors sat in their crescent dais, draped in silks, armour and feathers depending on their species, eyes glinting like knives in the firelight. Their voices were velvet and steel as they laid out charges of aggression, of unpredictability, of crimes against the order they had so carefully built. They called Earth a death world. They called humans predators, and they demanded that the predators bow. But humanity had come here not to bend. You mistake resilience for hostility. We will not apologize for existing. The silence had been long enough to hear the crystals hum. Then the councillors stirred, and the real trial began. The High Arbiter, a towering Elvari draped in robes of silver filaments, leaned forward, her many-faceted eyes catching the starlight. "Humanity," she hissed, her voice amplified by the chamber's resonance. "You arrive here as supplicants, yet speak as if equals. You stand accused of destabilizing 3 sectors, of igniting wars among younger species who imitate your reckless nature. Do you deny this?" Ambassador Holden did not look away. His suit was plain compared to the jeweled armor around him, his shoulders squared as if he still carried the weight of Earth's gravity in his bones. He lifted his chin, letting the silence stretch just enough to force the aliens to lean forward. "We deny nothing," Holden said. A ripple went through the chamber, the word carried differently in human tongues. Not slippery denial, but the weight of acceptance, of defiance without apology. "We deny nothing because what you call destabilization, we call freedom. What you call recklessness, we call courage. You, who have hidden in your crystal cages for millennia, mistake our will to live as an attack against your order. But your order was built on chains." A snarl of metallic cords cut the air. One of the Draconis councillors, scaled and broad, rose to his feet. "Chains? You dare accuse this council, child of dirt and storms? We held this galaxy together when your kind still struck flint in caves." His tail lashed the polished floor. "Your kind will bring fire to the stars until nothing remains but ash." Holden's lips twitched into the faintest smile. "And you fear that ash might be yours." The chamber erupted. Voices layered over one another in dozens of languages, clicking mandibles, rumbling growls, harmonic tones that could crack stone. Some demanded immediate sanction against Earth. Others shouted for restraint, for study, for delay. But all spoke of fear. That was the thread binding them, the raw terror of a species that refused to break the way others had. As the uproar surged, the council's enforcers shifted at the chamber's edges. Tall figures in black exosuits, their faces hidden behind masks of glass. Weapons hummed at their hips. Humanity's delegation was small, only 7 men and women, their uniforms threadbare compared to the alien regalia. But they did not flinch. They had stood before storms that toppled cities. They had buried friends in shallow graves after plagues and wars. The mutters of aliens did not move them. When the cacophony reached a breaking point, the High Arbiter struck her staff against the dais. The sound rang like thunder through the crystal chamber, forcing silence back into the air. Her voice was quieter now, but edged like obsidian. Humanity stands on trial not only for itself, but for the idea it represents. We cannot allow predators to teach prey to bare their teeth. Your defiance has already infected the Trell, the Mirrodin, and the Sova. Civilizations once docile now question our decrees. You would unravel the foundation of galactic peace. Holden took one step forward. Even that tiny movement seemed an offense here, like a wolf pacing into a throne room. Peace, he said. The word hung bitter on his tongue. You dare call this peace. You bind weaker species in treaties that strip them of choice. You demand they surrender their weapons, their pride, their sovereignty, in exchange for scraps of your protection. And when they kneel, you call it order. When they bow, you call it peace. But when they finally stand, you call it war. The Arbiter's silver gaze flickered, but she did not look away. And if we do not hold the line? Chaos. Extinction. The galaxy cannot afford humanity's flame. Holden's voice dropped lower, the kind of tone that humans used at gravesides at battlefields in whispers before the storm broke. Then let the galaxy burn brighter than it ever has. The words were not shouted. They were not dramatic. They were spoken with the certainty of someone who had already buried a world, already seen the worst, already survived. And that made them heavier than any roar. A councillor of the Songweavers leaned forward, feathers rippling in unease. You threaten the council itself? Holden's answer was colder still. We threaten nothing. We promise only this. Humanity will never bow. The chamber convulsed. Some councillors shouted for immediate censure, demanding human fleets be dismantled, their colonies seized. Others, more cautious, whispered that such defiance could not be extinguished by decree, that it might be wiser to contain it, bargain with it, even learn from it. The fracture was visible now, running jagged through the council's perfect crystal facade. Outside the dais, the humans stood like a blade of shadow amid jewels. Even as enforcers closed in, their faces betrayed no fear. And as the argument spiraled into fury, every eye in the galaxy's most sacred chamber was drawn, reluctantly, inevitably, back to them. Because in that moment, even the oldest races could not help but feel the pulse of something they thought long dead. A reminder. A promise. Fire. And Chapter 2 ended with the Arbiter's staff striking once more, the sound echoing like a war drum. Then humanity will be judged. The crystal chamber still thrummed with the echoes of Ambassador Holden's words. Humanity would never bow. Every councillor present felt it in their bones, in the pulse of the light running through the starbone walls, in the sudden, uncomfortable awareness that a species they had long considered insignificant had just reshaped the power balance of the galaxy with nothing more than a few words. Yet silence was fleeting. The High Arbiter's staff struck the floor again, sending sparks of energy scattering across the polished surface. If humanity refuses judgment, if it rejects the Council's will, she said, each syllable brittle with fury, then we shall enforce it ourselves. Murmurs erupted across the chamber. Alien voices, some guttural, some melodic, some clicking in rhythms unfamiliar to human ears, all agreed on one thing. The Council could not allow defiance unchecked. But for once, humanity did not wait for orders, decrees, or threats. Outside the chamber, across the dark reaches of subspace, the first Earth fleet had begun to move, not in massed formation or ceremonial parade as the Council might have expected. No, they moved like predators who knew the terrain, who had studied centuries of battle and found every weakness. Small, nimble ships slipped through detection arrays, vaulting from system to system, leaving no trace except burned-out sensors and wreckage where alien patrols had been. On Velthar Prime, Tar-Kel watched the skies ignite with destruction he could not comprehend. Entire squadrons were reduced to shards before they could react, orbital installations vaporized as if the planet itself had unleashed a weapon. And yet, there were no fleet markings, no flags, no identification beyond the ominous black silhouettes of Earth-designed ships. Every human voice that came through communications channels was calm, clipped, and terrifyingly precise. Tar-Kel, they said, we have arrived. Stand down, or die. Your choice. The strategos of the Velthari had never heard anything like it. He had led 1,000,000 ships into battle. He had faced rebellions, pirate fleets, and internal coups. And yet, as he heard the human voice, steady and unshakable, something cold and primal swept through him. This was not negotiation. This was a promise, and the promise carried death. Back in the council chamber, the alien delegates reacted predictably. Shock, horror, some disbelief. A chorus of voices demanded to know who had authorized such audacity. The High Arbiter, though furious, hesitated. No protocol covered the arrival of an unannounced fleet whose power dwarfed that of several sectors combined. Some whispered about Earth's Death Worlder programs, rumors of bioweapons, ground forces trained on uninhabitable planets, soldiers who could survive conditions lethal to every other species in the galaxy. These whispers were amplified when human transports began to drop their cargo onto Velthar Prime. First, reconnaissance units, humans moving silently across terrain that should have incinerated or crushed them. Heat, radiation, toxic atmospheres, all irrelevant. They adapted, survived and advanced, unhurried but unstoppable. The Council monitors could only watch, powerless, as entire alien battalions evaporated under the combined precision of human technology and human cunning. By the time Tarkil realized the humans were not coming to negotiate but to eliminate, the first lines of Velthari defense had been cut in half. His war rooms were in chaos, officers screaming over scrambled communications. Every strategy, every contingency, every clever defense had been anticipated and neutralized. He realized, with a cold dread, that Earth's forces did not merely fight. They predicted, they adapted, they exploited the weaknesses inherent in every alien species, even those that considered themselves masters of war. Back on the chamber floor, Ambassador Holden watched the feeds of Velthar Prime flicker across the holoscreens. He turned slightly toward the councillors. "We are not here to negotiate peace. We are here to enforce consequence. You wanted to see what humans can do when ignored? Now you know." Some councillors gasped, some leaned forward in horror. The implications were undeniable. If humans could annihilate a fleet, level a planet's defences and move silently across lethal terrain without casualties, what then could they not do? Across the council, fear spread like a contagion. Not the fear of power, not the fear of weapons, but the fear of a species unbound by protocol, unchained from morality or expectation, acting with the full weight of millennia of human survival instincts. Tarkil's voice rang suddenly in the chamber monitors, a ragged, broken sound. "Stop! This is not what we requested." Holden's eyes narrowed. "You asked for help. You wanted mercy. You received Earth's deadliest. That is the difference." The chamber's monitors filled with images of the Velthari fleets collapsing, orbital cities ablaze, ground legions shredded by humans moving through terrain that should have killed them in moments. Councillors fell silent. The weight of reality pressed down. This was no conventional war. This was myth made flesh. The humans did not merely destroy, they rewrote the rules of engagement. And yet, even as Chapter 3 unfolded with unstoppable human power sweeping across Velthar Prime, there was a precision, a restraint. No collateral damage beyond the enemy's lines, no panic among civilian populations. Every action was deliberate, exact, terrifying in its efficiency. It was as if the species had evolved to be the ultimate predator, not of itself, not of the galaxy, but of anyone who underestimated it. And then came the final move. The humans deployed a single, enormous device, unmarked, unannounced, moving like a ghost across the battlefield. It was not a weapon in the conventional sense. It was a signal, a demonstration, a lesson. One that left Tarkel shaking, and the Veltari fleets paralyzed with dread. By the time the smoke cleared, the message was unmistakable. Humanity could have obliterated the entire planet, but they chose not to. Instead, they had taught a lesson in inevitability. Any species that dared request help from Earth would now think twice. In the council chamber, the Arbiter leaned forward, crystal eyes wide. This cannot continue. They must be stopped. Holden's gaze met hers, unblinking. "Stop us? You still misunderstand. Humanity does not need your approval. You never did." The camera feeds, relayed to every holographic monitor, showed the humans assembling, calm and methodical, waiting for Tarkel to surrender, to concede, to accept the consequences of summoning the deadliest species in the galaxy. And as Chapter 3 closed, the Council finally understood. Humanity's help was not a gift. It was a reckoning. The skies over Velthar Prime boiled with fury, a violent tapestry of green lightning and molten fire ripped from the upper atmosphere. The Velthari cityscapes, once pristine and shining, were now fractured by orbital bombardments and precise surgical strikes that shredded entire battle complexes without touching the civilian sectors. From orbit, the human ships appeared almost spectral, black silhouettes moving between plasma blasts with a deliberate grace that no alien design could match. On the ground, humanity's operatives began to disembark in pods designed to pierce the planet's hostile gravity and toxic atmospheric layers. The Council's reports had indicated that Velthar Prime was unbreathable to any human without life support, a world of acidic rains, electrical storms, and geologically unstable terrain. It had been centuries since any human had set foot on a true death world, yet these operatives emerged as though the planet were a second home. Heat-resistant suits sealed against the corrosive atmosphere, boots gripping fractured rock, sensors calibrated to detect the slightest sign of life. They moved in teams smaller than any alien military would consider effective, yet they struck with precision that shattered unit after unit of Velthari defense forces. Each engagement was a demonstration of human ingenuity and ferocity. One squad turned the alien energy grid against itself, igniting entire defensive batteries. Another neutralized patrols with silent explosives, leaving no trace of their presence beyond the bodies of the enemy. Tarkel watched from the high balcony of his shattered citadel, unable to comprehend what he had summoned. His fleets were reduced to wreckage, his cities crumbling under attacks he could neither predict nor counter. And yet the humans advanced without haste, almost contemplative in their method. "They move as if Velthar Prime itself obeys them," he muttered, his claws digging into the railing. Every strike, every deployment, perfect. The Council monitors displayed the chaos below. Alien forces scattering, structures collapsing, communication arrays destroyed. Some councillors finally realized the magnitude of what had happened when the human units began taking the fight into the heart of the city. Street by street, block by block, humanity advanced, leaving the Velthari ground forces in tatters. There were no screams, there were no pleas, only the precise, terrifying execution of strategy. From their vantage points, the humans seemed more myth than flesh, a force shaped by millennia of survival, conditioned by planets that chewed up weaker species and spat them out as dust. Even the toughest Velthari soldiers fell to humans armed with weapons that could have been described as antiquated, yet each strike carried the certainty of death and the weight of inevitability. Kalen's voice returned to the council chamber monitors, calm and deliberate. "Tarkel, surrender your forces. Stand down or the next city falls." The strategos swallowed hard. He had fought in wars that spanned light years, faced entire fleets in simultaneous engagement, but never before had he encountered a species that could make a demand and enforce it with such lethal precision. He opened his mouth to respond, but the ground shook as humans deployed massive devices in the city's heart: energy projectors, psychological warfare modules, and autonomous combat drones designed to dismantle the enemy's command hierarchy. The city fell silent as systems blinked out, defenses rendered useless. Velthari officers tried to rally their troops, but every attempt failed. Commands were intercepted, pathways collapsed, units vanished before they could execute even the simplest maneuver. The humans were everywhere, yet nowhere, striking with a speed and efficiency that seemed preternatural. Back in the council chamber, panic spread among the delegates. Whispered reports suggested that human operatives were not just neutralizing forces, they were reshaping the battlefield itself. Entire districts of Velthari cities were converted into traps, channels for human tactical advantage. Each defensive line the Velthari established became a liability, every attempt at retaliation feeding the humans' plan. Councillor Resch's feathers bristled as he leaned into the communicator. How? How can a single species, these mere humans, control a death world like this? Holden's reply was simple, cold, and unwavering. Because they survive where others perish, they fight when all hope is lost, they adapt to every threat, and they never surrender. On Velthar Prime, the city's final defensive bastions crumbled. Human squads moved with surgical efficiency, bypassing unnecessary destruction and targeting only what would end the conflict fastest. The surviving Velthari troops attempted a desperate counterattack, but the humans had already anticipated every maneuver. Automated drones cut off retreat routes, while elite squads descended from orbital pods to neutralize command hubs. Tarkel's hands shook as he realized the truth. He had called for help, and humanity had answered, not with mercy, but with execution calibrated to ensure nothing would rise again without their sanction. As the sun of Velthar Prime dipped below the horizon, the humans paused. Their mission was not to destroy the planet, but to demonstrate the cost of underestimating Earth. The remaining Velthari forces, scattered and leaderless, could only watch as their cities smouldered, their fleets destroyed, their command structure shattered. Across the galaxy, councillors at every observation point took note. Humanity did not attack indiscriminately. They attacked decisively. They attacked with purpose and inevitability. And in that decisive pause, the Council realized something far more terrifying than the destruction. Humanity could have obliterated the planet entirely. Yet they had chosen restraint. That choice, deliberate and unyielding, was more chilling than any slaughter. They were not bound by mercy. They were not bound by protocol. They were bound by their own code, and that code guaranteed that anyone foolish enough to summon them would face consequences beyond imagination. Tarkel, broken and trembling, lowered his head before the human commander's face projected through communications. What do you want?" Halden's response was slow, deliberate, almost casual. "What you asked for. But now you know what the cost is. Humanity does not negotiate mercy. We deliver results, and we never forget." Chapter 4 closed with a galaxy-wide tremor of realization. Humans had arrived to assist, but assistance from Earth was never simple, never predictable, and always lethal, and as the fires of Velthar Prime burned under their precision, the Council understood that they had not summoned allies. They had unleashed Earth's judgment. The aftermath of Velthar Prime's first strike was a silent testament to humanity's efficiency. Orbital scans revealed smoldering cities, shattered fleets drifting in the void, and ground forces decimated with surgical precision. Yet even amid the ruin, there were no indiscriminate attacks, no civilian slaughter, no excess destruction beyond what was required to end the conflict on humanity's terms. The Council scrambled to understand what had just occurred. Messages flew between systems at faster-than-light speeds, but the reports were fragmentary, incomplete, contradictory. Some claimed entire fleets had been destroyed in minutes. Others reported human squads moving across Deathworld terrain unharmed by radiation, storms, or corrosive atmospheres. Every account was terrifying, yet none captured the full picture. In the council chamber, chaos reigned. Councillor Resh of the Osirians shrieked over the din, feathers bristling in rage. "This cannot continue. One species cannot hold such power. We must act." "Act how?" hissed Vale of the Orin, translucent skin pulsing with faint light. "We cannot engage them. Not yet. Not without annihilation." The High Arbiter's staff glowed dimly as she contemplated the reports. Even she, who had presided over 1,000 wars, 1,000 decisions of life and death, felt a cold unease settle in her core. Humanity had arrived, uninvited, unannounced, and the galaxy trembled at their presence. On Velthar Prime, human squads had already begun consolidating control. Pods dropped behind what little organized resistance remained, sealing off avenues of retreat. They did not engage in battle for the sake of spectacle. Every move, every strike, every deployment was a calculation designed to eliminate the enemy's ability to regroup. In the shadow of a shattered command citadel, Tarkil watched the human forces methodically encircle the surviving Velthari units. His fleet, once the pride of the Concord, now floated as broken hulls and empty shells, drifting in orbit with no hope of repair. "They are unstoppable," he whispered, voice trembling. "And yet, they do not annihilate us." A human operative emerged from the shadow of a ruined tower, suit scorched in places but immaculate in precision. From the comms, their voice was calm, deliberate. "Tarkel, we are not here to destroy your people. We are here to teach a lesson. Every action you take from this point forward carries a consequence. Surrender your command and we will limit the destruction. Resist, and every city falls." The Stratigo's hands clenched the railing as he surveyed the encroaching human squads. You claim mercy?" he rasped. The operative's reply was simple, almost chilling. "Mercy is not ours to grant. Consequences." Back in the council chamber, delegates debated in fevered voices. Some called for immediate sanctions, arguing that humanity had overstepped all bounds. Others urged caution, realizing that the humans were not reckless, but precise, controlled, and terrifyingly capable. A voice spoke quietly from the far edge of the chamber. Councillor Vale. They are not like us. They never have been. And every species that has tried to oppose them has either perished or been reduced to ashes. The galaxy may not survive if we force them into open war. The High Arbiter's eyes narrowed. Then what do you propose? Observation, Vale whispered. Control where we can, monitor the rest, and pray we do not provoke the inevitable. Even as the council debated, humanity's influence spread across Velthar Prime. Every remaining pocket of resistance collapsed. Every command hub was seized, and every surviving Velthari soldier was either neutralized or made to understand the futility of defiance. Tarkil realized the horrifying truth. His species had called for help and received a response unlike any other in galactic history. Earth did not negotiate, Earth did not parley, and Earth did not forgive weakness. Every move had been calculated to maximize effect while minimizing collateral for those deemed innocent. The human fleets in orbit moved in tandem with the ground forces. Every strike was synchronized, every maneuver rehearsed with foresight the Velthari could not match. Entire orbital defense grids were disabled without a single civilian casualty. Humans adapted to every countermeasure, every trick, every trap. They learned faster than any algorithm, reacted faster than any weapon system, and pressed the advantage with precision and lethality that seemed preternatural. Across the galaxy, news of the operation spread. Species that had long mocked humanity whispered in fear. Even the Council's most powerful fleets were re-evaluating their assumptions. The whispers began to coalesce into a single understanding. Humanity was not merely a threat, they were a force of nature. Unstoppable once engaged, unstoppable once provoked. On Velthar Prime, Tarkel made his final move. He attempted a mass deployment of surviving forces, hoping to break the human encirclement through sheer numbers. Pods dropped from orbit, squads emerged from fortified positions, energy weapons flared, but the humans had anticipated every maneuver. Autonomous drones struck at the command nodes, cutting off coordination. Ground squads moved through the chaos like phantoms, neutralizing opposition with minimal effort. In moments, the final Velthari offensive was shattered. Tarkel's last line of defense was gone, his forces decimated, his cities smoldering. And yet, as human squads paused before the Stratego citadel, no unnecessary destruction was inflicted. The humans did not gloat, they did not celebrate, they merely stood ready, a reminder that their presence was both consequence and warning. Tarkel fell to his knees. What do you want? Ambassador Holden's voice was steady, carrying across comms and into the Stratego's ears. You asked for help. You received it. Know this, humanity does not tolerate failure, weakness, or deception. You have survived today. Tomorrow, the lesson continues. In the council chamber, delegates were forced to confront a reality they could no longer ignore. Humanity had not only defended Velthar Prime, they had reshaped it according to their will. Every action had been deliberate, every response calculated, and every council member realized, for the first time in recorded history, that Earth's forces were beyond any conventional threat assessment. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Even the High Arbiter's staff dimmed, as though recognizing the shift in balance. Across the galaxy, fleets paused mid-orbit, soldiers halted mid-strike, spies froze mid-infiltration. Humanity had moved, and the universe was forced to recalculate everything it knew about the species from the small blue planet. Velthar Prime smouldered beneath the cold light of its dying sun, yet the humans did not pause. Ground squads and orbital fleets had completed their initial objectives with ruthless efficiency, but this was merely the beginning. From the smouldering ruins, humanity projected forward, not with chaos, but with control, precision, and inevitability. Every surviving Velthari installation, every neutralized fleet, became a tool for observation, a hub to extend influence, to send a message across the galaxy that Earth's reckoning had only begun. The High Arbiter's crystal eyes reflected the feeds streaming from Velthar Prime. Councillors who had doubted the humans' capability now whispered their fears, trembling before a species that had turned a planetary defense into a lesson in inevitability. There was no doubt. Earth did not merely fight. Earth reshaped the battlefield, dictated terms, and left survival dependent on obedience and respect. Even as Chapter 6 began, the Council scrambled to react. Fleets from neighbouring systems were dispatched, ostensibly to contain humanity's influence. Each movement was calculated, each fleet carefully chosen to test the humans without committing overwhelming force. They believed they could challenge a planet that had fallen under human hands, but the galaxy had yet to understand a fundamental truth. Humans thrived where others failed. They adapted to death worlds, mastered environments lethal to other species, and learned faster than any intelligence array could predict. In orbit above a neighbouring star system, Admiral Kalen's fleet moved silently, using sensor shadows to mask its presence. Pods dropped toward the system's moon, carrying elite human operatives trained for environments that no alien had ever survived. The moment they touched the surface, the humans began their methodical sweep, neutralizing sentries, turning enemy defenses against themselves, dismantling command networks with quiet efficiency. Each strike, each calculated move, was an education for the galaxy. Humans were not reckless, nor were they chaotic. They were inevitability made flesh. Back in the council chamber, debates raged like storm clouds over a boiling ocean. Councillor Resch's feathers were singed by static energy as he shouted at anyone who would listen. "You cannot allow them to continue. One species cannot hold this power. They will reshape every system they touch." Veal of the Orin, translucent skin pulsing faintly, countered with a grim shake of his head. "No, they already have. And if we strike recklessly, we risk invoking the very wrath we have underestimated. They are not merely fighting, they are teaching a lesson. Every fleet, every command, every pod that drops, it is calculated, precise and lethal." Reports arrived in waves from Velthar Prime and the surrounding systems. Entire alien militias were immobilized, not by overwhelming numbers, but by the humans' strategic foresight. Command hubs were neutralized before defensive maneuvers could be enacted. Sensors turned against enemy scouts. Escape routes collapsed silently. Communication lines were severed, leaving enemy soldiers isolated, confused, and incapable of coordinated response. Even those who survived the first engagements were left with an unmistakable lesson etched into their minds. Humanity did not forgive mistakes. Kalen observed the data, unflinching. "They believe they are fighting humans," he muttered to his second-in-command. "They are not. They are confronting the consequence of misjudgment." Indeed, across the galaxy, the effects of Earth's campaign were already rippling outward. Minor systems that had once submitted to alien oversight began to reconsider alliances. Traders, spies, and diplomats whispered of humans who struck with surgical precision, who controlled death worlds, and who imposed consequences that were absolute. Fear spread faster than any fleet could travel, faster than any message could carry. Humanity's mythic reputation grew with every strike. On Velthar Prime, Tarkel clutched the shattered railing of his citadel, watching human squads advance. Every attempt at deception, every desperate countermeasure had been anticipated. Every trap had been turned back upon his own troops. The Strategos finally understood the magnitude of what he had summoned. He had asked for help, and the humans had delivered judgment, not recklessly, not indiscriminately, but with precision that made even victory a tool of teaching. They are beyond anything we have faced," he whispered. "They do not merely fight, they educate. They punish, they do not relent, and they do not forgive." Kalen's comms crackled again, human voice steady, unwavering. "We are not here to negotiate peace. We are here to enforce consequence. You asked for help, you received the deadliest." The galaxy watched as humanity expanded its reach. Systems that had previously considered themselves safe now trembled under the mere suggestion of human presence. Reports from field units indicated that human squads were restructuring planetary defenses, reinforcing infrastructure, neutralizing latent threats, and leaving behind lessons that ensured no future rebellion could occur without exacting cost. In orbit above a distant gas giant, a fleet of alien ships prepared to intercept what they assumed were scattered human forces. But the humans had already anticipated the engagement, turning the gas giant's natural magnetic storms into a weapon. Energy discharges ripped through enemy hulls before they could react. Sensors jammed, communication lines collapsed, and command hierarchies fell into chaos. The humans did not celebrate. They did not gloat. They merely advanced, leaving behind only the unavoidable truth. Underestimating Earth was fatal. The council chamber was in uproar. Some delegates began to speak openly of preemptive strikes against humanity itself, a course of action that could ignite galactic war. Others argued for observation, for diplomacy, for any method that did not provoke the species whose efficiency and lethality could no longer be measured against conventional tactics. Veal spoke quietly, almost to himself. They are not a force, they are inevitability, and anyone who steps in their path will become part of the lesson. Back on Velthar Prime, Tarkel finally surrendered, not with words but by lowering his weapon. The humans did not rejoice. They did not celebrate. They merely ensured that the remaining defenses were neutralized, that the planet was secured, and that the galaxy understood the price of underestimating humanity. The council chamber pulsed with tension, the walls of living crystal refracting the panic and disbelief of every delegate present. Even the High Arbiter, a figure revered across the galaxy for her unshakable judgment, found herself unmoored by the reports cascading from Velthar Prime, the neighboring systems, and scattered fleets that had attempted interception. Humanity's campaign was no longer confined to one planet. It was a galactic revelation, a statement of intent that transcended conventional politics, war, and diplomacy. Ambassador Holden's projection flickered into the center of the chamber, calm and deliberate. "We have responded to requests for assistance," his voice echoed, carrying the weight of inevitability. "Your species asked for help. You have received the Deadliest." Murmurs erupted across the chamber. Councillor Resh's feathers bristled violently. "Deadliest? You call this help? Entire fleets obliterated, worlds reduced to smouldering ruins. This is not assistance, it is annihilation." Holden's expression remained unreadable. "Assistance is measured not by comfort, but by outcome. You desired survival, you desired guidance, and you desired protection. What we deliver ensures none of your miscalculations are repeated. That is consequence. That is certainty." A screen flickered to life, showing the remaining pockets of resistance across Velthar Prime and surrounding systems. Each was under control, not by overwhelming force alone, but by calculated precision. Drones patrolled the skies, humans moved silently across Deathworld terrain, and enemy units that resisted were neutralized swiftly, methodically, without excess. Every move had been anticipated, every contingency accounted for. The High Arbiter's staff struck the floor, sending jagged arcs of energy across the chamber. "This cannot be allowed to continue. You overstep all protocol. You challenge the authority of the Council itself." Holden inclined his head slightly. "Protocol is only relevant to those willing to respect it. You have ignored the warnings, the histories, and the lessons. Humanity does not operate within your assumptions. We operate on consequence, efficiency, and the preservation of order where others fail. That is our law, and it is universal." Across the galaxy, fleets previously to intercept human forces faltered. Systems once assumed secure reported sabotage, neutralized defenses, and intelligence networks compromised by human foresight and adaptability. Every attempt to organize a countermeasure was met with anticipation, every offensive neutralized before it could manifest. Tarkel, brought before the Council via human-controlled comms, addressed the chamber. His voice shook. We called for help. We did not expect this precision, this inevitability. They do not merely fight, they teach, they enforce, they punish mistakes." Holden's voice, calm and commanding, carried across the chamber. "You asked for help. You received Earth's Deadliest. The lesson is clear. Underestimate humanity, and the price is total. Respect humanity, and you will survive with consequence understood. The choice has always been yours." The High Arbiter's eyes flared with energy. "You cannot impose judgment on the Council. You cannot." "You misunderstand," Holden interrupted. "We do not impose. We execute consequences. That is different. Consider it a demonstration." Outside the chamber, monitors displayed the final phase of human operations. Velthar Prime's strategic points were secured, surviving enemy personnel isolated and disarmed, and human squads now positioned at every key orbital station. In neighboring systems, fleets once confident of victory now floated in disarray, neutralized by intelligence networks turned against them, or rendered immobile by environmental manipulation the humans had anticipated. One by one, the Council's delegates fell silent. Even the most aggressive warlike species recognized the unassailable truth. Humans were mythic, beyond conventional assessment, and capable of decisive action that combined lethal efficiency with unerring foresight. Holden's projection remained central, unwavering. We do not seek war, but we do not fear it. Every system, every fleet, every civilization that underestimated Earth has learned the same lesson. Humanity is inevitable. Our methods are precise. Our consequences are absolute. Councillor Vale of the Orin whispered to no one in particular, his skin pulsing faintly. They are beyond any reckoning we have known. They do not negotiate, they do not plead, they do not relent. They end things decisively, and the galaxy trembles in their wake. The chamber remained in stunned silence as the reality sank in. Humanity had not only answered calls for help, they had rewritten the rules of engagement for the entire galaxy. Every species, every fleet, every council member now understood. Earth's law was consequence, and its enforcement was absolute. In orbit over Velthar Prime, human operatives began consolidating final control. Communication networks were restored, defensive systems stabilized under human oversight, and surviving populations, both alien and human, were accounted for. There was no celebration, no triumphalism. There was only control, precision, and the inevitable lesson delivered. Kalen surveyed the operation from the command bridge. They came for help, he said softly, and they left a galaxy that will never forget their presence. Not for generations, not for centuries. Humanity does not forgive, but it teaches, and everyone who watches will learn the same lesson, whether they wish it or not. Tarkel, finally realizing the full scope of his defeat, bowed his head before the humans. We understand. The mistake was ours. The price, clear. Holden's calm voice concluded the message, ringing through every channel and across every system within range. You asked for help. You received Earth's deadliest. The galaxy now knows. Let this be remembered. The ruins of Velthar Prime glowed faintly under the fractured light of its dying sun, casting long shadows across the smouldering cities. Smoke rose in silent columns, twisted by acid rains that fell with relentless regularity, etching patterns into rock and metal alike. Human operatives walked the streets with quiet purpose, ensuring that every surviving structure was stabilized, every remaining threat neutralized, every life accounted for. They did not linger in triumph. They did not gloat. They moved with the inevitability of judgment, a living reminder that to call on humanity was to invite both aid and consequence in equal measure. Across the galaxy, systems that had once considered themselves secure now trembled in quiet acknowledgement. Trade routes shifted, fleets rerouted, diplomats whispered in corridors far from human eyes. Every civilization, every species had witnessed the same lesson. Earth's deadliest were precise, unrelenting, and unavoidable. The Council itself had been forced to re-evaluate centuries of assumptions, treaties, and hierarchies. Humanity was no longer a distant curiosity. Humanity was a force of consequence that reshaped the balance of power simply by existing. On the bridge of the Valiant Resolve, Kalen watched the streams of data flowing from Velthar Prime. Every sensor reading, every environmental scan, every tactical deployment reflected the same truth. The humans had adapted, mastered, and imposed order where chaos had reigned. The planet was scarred, yes, but under human oversight, it was becoming more resilient than it had ever been under alien stewardship. They will remember this, Kalen said softly to his second-in-command. Every species, every system, every fleet that thought themselves untouchable. Humanity does not forgive misjudgment, and they never forget. From orbit, Ambassador Holden's projection broadcasted the final message to the Council and the galaxy, a calm, unwavering declaration. We do not seek conquest, nor do we seek war for its own sake. We seek consequence. You asked for help. You received Earth's deadliest. Let the record show. Humanity does not negotiate mercy, and the cost of underestimation is absolute. The galaxy has witnessed the inevitability of our response. Remember it. The chamber of the Council was silent for long moments. Even the most aggressive delegates did not speak. They did not need to. They had seen the effects firsthand, and now they understood. Earth had not arrived merely to intervene. Earth had arrived to reshape perception itself, to set a precedent that would ripple through every civilization for generations to come. Meanwhile, on the surface of Velthar Prime, human squads moved silently through the remnants of command centers, stabilizing power grids, ensuring that survivors, both alien and human, had their needs addressed, their safety ensured. The humans did not act out of charity. They acted because to them, control, order, and consequence were inseparable. The planet was a canvas, and their actions were precise strokes, each leaving a permanent imprint on the galaxy's understanding of Earth's capabilities. The remaining Velthari soldiers who survived were gathered, not in chains, but in controlled environments where they could witness the aftermath of their miscalculations. They saw the cities rebuilt in careful balance, the automated systems stabilizing critical infrastructure, and the humans patrolling with calm authority. Even in defeat, there was lesson and inevitability, a clear message. Those who underestimated humanity would do so only once. In distant star systems, the ripple effects of the humans' campaign spread like a silent tide. Fleets altered course at the hint of Earth's presence. Diplomats negotiated with new caution. Spies and scouts recalculated risk, knowing that the consequences of misjudgment now carried the weight of planetary-level response and strategic foresight. Every corner of the galaxy began to whisper the same truth. Humans were not merely soldiers. Humans were mythic figures, legends made flesh, whose reach and understanding extended far beyond what anyone had previously imagined. Kalen walked along the surface of Velthar Prime, the wind whipping acidic rain across his suit. He surveyed the remains of alien defenses, noting the quiet efficiency with which his teams had dismantled and repurposed every hazard. This was not war. This was lesson delivered through action, a cosmic message framed in the language the galaxy could understand. Survival demanded respect for humanity. As he looked to the horizon, where the sun fractured through the clouds of destruction, Kalen reflected on what had occurred. Humanity had arrived to assist. Yes, but their assistance was not what the galaxy expected. They had not bargained, they had not pleaded, they had not asked for permission. Instead, they had executed inevitability, and in doing so, they had become more than a species. They had become a myth, a force whose influence would echo across time and space, and in that reflection, Kalen understood the final, unspoken truth. The galaxy had believed it could measure, contain, and predict the actions of every species. It had believed it could define the boundaries of power, influence, and survival. But humanity had shattered those assumptions. Humans adapted where others failed, survived where others perished, and acted with a precision that no machine, no council, and no fleet could anticipate. The mythic scale of humanity's presence became clear not in the destruction they left behind, but in the restraint they exercised. Every life preserved, every city stabilized, every system secured was a deliberate message. The deadliest do not act indiscriminately. The deadliest act with purpose, with judgment, with infallible precision. Across the galaxy, legends began to take shape. Stories of Velthar Prime, of the humans who arrived and left only consequence, spread from system to system, whispered in council halls, recounted in military academies, and carved into the memories of species who had once believed themselves safe. The myth of Earth's deadliest would endure for centuries, a living reminder of the cost of underestimating the small blue planet. Kalen looked back at the stars, noting how small and distant they seemed compared to the presence of humanity. The galaxy itself had shifted, not physically but perceptually. The balance of power had changed, the rules rewritten, and the record etched. Humanity had arrived, the galaxy had seen, and no species would ever misjudge Earth again. And as the sun of Velthar Prime dipped below the horizon, casting the final light on cities rebuilt with care and precision, Kalen knew one unshakable truth. Earth was no longer just a homeworld. Earth was inevitability incarnate, a mythic force whose judgment, precision, and ferocity would define the future of the galaxy for generations to come. The humans did not celebrate. They did not claim victory. They merely prepared for the next inevitable challenge. Leaving the galaxy with a singular, haunting certainty, to call on humanity was to invite the deadliest consequence, measured, precise, and inescapable. And in that quiet, mythic moment, the stars themselves seemed to tremble at the presence of a species that had become legend made flesh, eternal in influence and unyielding in purpose.